Hey everybody, welcome back to the YouTube channel. Happy Friday. What are we gonna build today?
Get out of here. What are you, bro, go change. This is ridiculous.
Starting a YouTube channel is hard, man. I want what you've got.
I earned those 35 views. Hello everybody and welcome back to another bar builder video. Let's start that again. Hello everybody and welcome back to another bar builder video. Today I'm working on a personal project for my kitchen. Do I need it? No. Do I want it? Yes. Does my girlfriend say we need it? That as well. The entire carcass, which I'm actually going to show you the SketchUp model that I did on the screen right now, probably somewhere over here, is made out of plywood for the encasement, and all the door fronts are going to be made out of this wormy maple behind me. So we got to start by breaking down some plywood and planing some maple, and then we're going to glue this shit together and it's going to be awesome. Stay tuned. So here I am, very casually, breaking down plywood into 12-inch strips. This not only maximizes the amount of wood that I'm going to get out of these sheets of plywood, but my kitchen is located in a typical row house in Toronto, which means that I haven't got a ton of width to play with. Therefore, 12 inches was both enough to suit our storage needs, as well as not enough to impede movement in and around the kitchen. And to be honest, this whole thing was intended to make the kitchen more ergonomic, as well as hopefully look nice. Now, I absolutely love to cook, so it was important to create something that was both functional and accessible. You'll also see here that I'm taping my cut lines. Don't let anyone tell you any different. This makes your cuts magnitudes cleaner than they would otherwise be. As you may know, veneer on plywood is notoriously thin, no matter where you buy it from. And the chip out can be a total clusterfuck to deal with if you're not dealing with a completely new blade with many teeth. So if you're not planning to wood fill and paint absolutely everything, this is kind of a must. And take it from a guy who has made a shit ton of mistakes, including trying to tackle cuts like this sideways on a table saw. Save those cuts for when you're sure you've got your fence completely dialed in and you're not dealing with full sheets. Otherwise, you're probably going to bind your blade. It's really hard to push these things through straight if you're going sideways, or even lengthways, as you'll find out in a couple of minutes. You can also see here I started that cut without taping the line, and even that few inches that I made it through that piece of plywood, there was a noticeable difference in chip out. So tape your lines, people. Tape them. So this is exactly what I was talking about. I asked my shopmate Nate to give me a hand sending this sheet through lengthwise, and bam! Down the blade and pop the breaker. Plywood is no joke, man. You better get your giggles elsewhere, because this birch isn't interested in any of your shit. Alright, so we cut a bunch of 12-inch strips of 3/4 inch plywood. Right now, essentially what we gotta do is start making boxes. So we're gonna do that by lining everything up, striking a line, countersink bit, screws, and then we'll actually start to see how this thing looks when you start to put it together. Let's get to it. So I'm using these kind of crap but super useful Amazon corner clamps to hold my pieces in place while I have a chance to strike a line using that old carpenter's trick where you just sort of use your finger as a guide. Use a countersink bit to drive the screws home in a way that can be filled later, and most importantly, not split any plies in the process. Make no mistake, if you don't pre-drill while popping screws into end grain, so to speak, there's a good chance you're going to separate something other than an egg yolk in your kitchen. And guess what? It's your cabinet. So we just complete the inside of the cabinet, and then it's going to be time to move on to placing the shelves on the inside. So we keep plugging along. This vertical cabinet stands at a whopping 7 feet tall. And next you're going to see me place the shelves in. Here's an image of the SketchUp file again to get a reference. These also get the countersink and screw treatment, again, to be filled later. And I use a combination square to get a good line on the inside, line my shelf up with that line, and drive screws in from the outside. Tedious? Maybe. Satisfying? Sometimes. Square? Rarely. Kidding, it came out perfect. And I'm just using a clamp to actually squeeze this thing together so that I get a nice tight pressure fit, so it doesn't want to move around too much on me. And we drive some screws home and that thing is solid. It's not going anywhere. Now we move on to the horizontal cabinet, which, although wider, presents its own challenges. I use the same corner clamps to keep things nice and square, and just complete the box. Then we flip it, pop the top on, and we have a nice square. Setting the interior shelves is like the other process. You sort of measure halfway, accounting for the thickness of the plywood, mark on either side, mark your lines, etc. Use the clamps to keep everything in line. Now setting the horizontal shelves is as easy as making a spacer block, resting your shelf on those, and then driving them home. Now, the other side was set into the middle using pocket screws, which I neglected to film, but you won't know that unless you open the cabinet and look really hard, in which case I must ask, who are you and what the hell are you doing in my house? So after a full day of breaking things down and screwing them together, this is roughly where we're at. So we've got our 2 plywood casements more or less put together. We're gonna put some cleats at the back so that we can attach it to the wall. But next up, we have to edge band all of this, we have to paint all of this, and then we gotta start making door fronts. But we'll save that for tomorrow. Oh, edge banding. Look, I know what you're gonna say. Chris, why spend hours in your workshop ironing shit onto your cabinet, trimming the excess, sanding ad nauseum, using the iron again because certain sections didn't stick, sanding again, cursing, throwing a fit, then resigning yourself to being alone and hunchback for the rest of your life? Simple. Details matter, and boy, did I ever go for details on this edge banding. I insisted on making these arrow together into a 4 corners type situation, which you'll see later, which I realized was pointless at the time due to the fact that I was planning to paint everything, but this detail single-handedly made me change my mind and only paint the outside. This is what I mean about details. Make no mistake, I ultimately completely screwed myself on this because while I was not painting the inside and the outside edges of the cabinet, I was finishing them in polyurethane, so I didn't take anything away from the process, but I think the finished product actually ended up looking way, way better. And luckily, this plywood was excellent. So as you can see here, this is sort of what the finished edge looks like, and this is the arrow together that I was talking about. So here's one of the ply carcasses done-ish. It's been edge banded all the way around. I've installed some triangles for mounting purposes. All that's left to do to this now is fill all these little screw holes with wood filler or putty or whatever you choose. The whole thing's been sanded, and then it's time to start making the drawer fronts and paint it. And I'm going to do the same thing to this guy over here, and I'll show you when it's all done. So we're back at the table saw now, and I recently made a new crosscut sled for the shop, replacing Senor crosscut with Abuelito crosscut, the much bigger and sturdier version of Senor crosscut. So I'm breaking down this giant piece of wormy maple that was about 13 inches wide and about 8 feet tall into manageable pieces to send through the planer. Now this makes it easier to deal with possible undulations in the wood. If you've ever tried to plane an 8-foot piece of anything, you'll know that it's difficult to get a consistent thickness over that big of a span. Make your life easier, cut things to their near final dimension, and send them through one by one. Trust me, you'll get more consistent results. Now, one of the biggest problems I had here, as you'll see me and Dustin dealing with, is that this planer, which is a bit of a hog, by the way, it's a 15-inch planer that was made in the 80s, I think. We replaced the blades, and it was just taking off so much material that it was jamming our dust collection. So I was constantly having to take the hose off, clean the thing out, and there's a bit of a filter on the inside of the dust collector that all of these long shavings were getting wrapped around. And the way I described it to Dustin was, it's a bit like throwing an octopus at a ceiling fan. And here we are at the jointer, just trying to get some nice faces so that we can run this through the table saw and get our final dimension so that it'll fit nicely into those voids. All right, now that we have planed most of our maple, and you saw me joint one side, I'm gonna run it through the table saw and get the exact width, minus 1/8, just so we don't have any fitment issues. And left a little bit extra on the height as well, so we can rip that on the crosscut sled, and hopefully everything fits. Alright, so for the tall bit of the unit, as you can see from earlier, is that I actually just took one giant piece and planed it all down and then ripped it, so I had like one big nice wide board. For the other section, I don't have a board as wide, so I'm actually going to end up joining some things together. So we're going to give these the same treatment as we did the other stuff, so we're going to plane it, and we're going to joint it, and then we're going to rip it on the table saw, and then we're actually going to have to do a glue up. So let's get started. So for any of you builders out there without one, buy a jointer. Set it up properly. Your glue ups will be infinitely tighter and require no dowels, dominoes, Yahtzees, biscuits, or any other food items. Now obviously I'm lying to you because I used biscuits here. In my experience, when you have thinner pieces of wood, anything sub 1 inch in thickness, they really help with alignment. It saves you on sanding shit later. So just line them up, run a line of glue, use your finger to spread, wipe that finger on your already scummy shop pants, and tighten the clamps. All right, so this is where we're at. So as you know, we've got this long vertical section, and what I've done is I've actually kind of fitted the doors. This is all that wormy maple, and I just marked up and kind of cut it with a jigsaw just so we have some handles to pull. And then this whole section, which is currently sitting on its side, has its own drawer fronts, or door fronts I should say. And these are them. Pay no mind to this giant stack of cedar. But what I did was do the glue ups in large sections and then rip it in half so that we're going to have continuous grain all along the front of this thing. So right now, it's everyone's favorite time. Let's get to sanding. So I'm using a Benjamin Moore paint here called Decorator's White. It matches all the trim and the other cabinets in my kitchen. So there's actually a technique here that I had to ask Nate about, as he's an incredibly skilled painter, about how to just paint the outside of these cabinets without fouling my freshly polished edge banding. A little inside baseball, but if you run your roller or even your brush off the edge quickly and at a 45-degree angle, there's much less of a chance of you rolling over and fucking up your fronts. This saves you from taping shit off, which, let's be honest, barely works anyway, or spending an hour just trying to cut a decent line, which, let's be honest, I can't do that either. But I gotta say, what this little bit of fresh paint does to not only clean up my wood filler on the outside, but highlight the natural grain of this wormy maple, it's unbelievable. The cabinets now look more like a solid volume, almost as if they were made from melamine or something, with the inset doors being the real showpiece. 10 out of 10 would do again. So here are the glamour shots, and here it is fully installed and staged. Well, not staged, this is actually all of my shit in my kitchen. But the contiguous grain looks awesome in my opinion. The doors open, they close nicely, everything has a nice positive feel to it. There are sliding spice racks, places for all my pots to hang, and finally, somewhere for all those damn cookbooks. So if you like this video, feel free to like, subscribe, comment, send treats in the mail, call your cousin, tell them you're sorry for stealing the last cupcake on their 5th birthday, whatever. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully we will catch you on the next one.